is Andy Revkin, Columbia Climate School's Sustain What webcast. A pop-up opportunity this morning with Tim Marshall. He's been professionally examining tornado damage for decades. And it's an honor to get you on here to talk a little bit about where do we go from here after this epic calamity. Looking back particularly at a tornado in 2004 that I'm digging in on, where terrible things happened to structures, but people were taken out of harm's way. So Tim, first of all, it's great to see you again and be in touch. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm glad.
We are on your Facebook page here. Maybe you could just start to describe, just tell us a little bit about how you got to be who you are, and in a brief way, and then we can get into this.
Well, yeah, I've been interested in tornadoes and tornado damage since I was a kid. So I had a F4 tornado hit my hometown, and I saw the carnage firsthand, and I had no clue at 9 years old, what is going on here. So I read everything I could. I wrote to media people. They responded. Dr. Fujita wrote to him, and He sent me a bunch of colored maps that I posted on my wall. I was in seventh heaven. Of course, he was in Chicago, and so was I. So it's like, it was fantastic. I went down and met him for the first time in 1974, right after the super outbreak, and he gave a beautiful talk. And I still have the notes from that talk and a photo. So I'm, inspired by Dr. Fujita. And so I want to kind of live a similar life, he's an engineer, trained engineer and meteorologist, and I wanted to do the same thing. So here I am as an engineer and meteorologist, been surveying damage for 45 years. So it's like, it just takes a spark, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It just takes a spark, somebody that you look up to and is a role model for you. And then it just keeps going.
And it took for you that initial motivation of what just happened, the tornado.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Well, when you're 9 and 10 years old, you're in this curious stage. And I already love science. I already was into weather. My parents, in fact, asked me the Christmas before what I wanted for Christmas. I said a barometer. They go, what? I said a barometer, because I took daily weather records. And this is before the tornado hit. And
fascinating.
Then after the tornado, I did a science fair project for the school district on tornadoes and won the top award. And that was another. Yeah, I kept on getting encouraged, motivated. The teachers that I had were phenomenal. They saw that I was interested in science, and they encouraged me to pursue that. And that's what it takes. It takes your peers, teachers, parents to encourage you. And I was already interested in science. I knew exactly what I wanted to do the rest of my life, right then and there.
So let's just very briefly touch on the F and EF thing. You said it was a F4 tornado that hit your town, and and of course Fujita, the scientist you just described, is the one who came up with the original F scale. What wasn't called the Fujita scale. He didn't call it that. But when you think of an F4 tornado, we're going to talk about one in a minute, and then we'll ask about what just happened. Just give people an idea of what that means.
Well, tornadoes are rated on a scale from 0 to 5, 5 being the most intense. So 4 is a major, major event. It's a high-end tornado. It leaves a pile of debris on the foundations, and that's what we saw in Oak Lawn.
A pile of debris and nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, we have bi-level and two-story homes, and they're just reduced to rubble.
Yeah. And tell me about that piece of wood that went through a truck tire. What does that say to you?
Well, this has been something that I've been very interested in for a long time. And I'm interested in high-speed projectiles. So in this instance, we have a truck which is clearly not in a high wind speed zone. Otherwise, the truck wouldn't be there. But there are things flying around. And I think it points out that tornadoes are not clean. They have a lot of debris flying around. And this is why it's not a good idea to go to a window and open it in advance of a tornado, because these things are flying outside the tornado.
Yeah.
And your windows are going to open up anyways. So it's with all this debris. It's not a clean wind. It is full of debris. And you can see the marks on the truck as well, with small gravel, pieces of glass, and they do a number.
And the National Weather Service is still assessing the multi-state tornado in this case for strength. I think I saw this morning there's one portion that they see as at least F3. I don't know. That process will play out, of course, but in the damage you were looking at, just describe the area that I'm going to show some of these pictures of where you were on site.
Yeah, I looked at two areas, the Mayfield and Dawson Springs. And so these are dense areas, population, lots of different building types. And that's what we're interested in, is the different kinds of buildings and how they perform. Mm-hmm. Volunteer on the American Society of Civil Engineers committee for estimating tornado wind speeds. And we do that from the damage indirectly. And so they've asked me to get enough information together so they can put out a standard in a couple of years. And that's what we're doing. We're going ahead and looking at various things like that. So water tower there, Mayfield, very modern water tower that had toppled, but it had anchoring issues. And this is what I want to find out. I want to see how well built are these structures. And I can go in and I can learn from that and find out, how they're built and then how they fail.
And is this still Mayfield?
Yes. And those are three storage buildings I looked at there in the right side there, which did quite well, actually, because they were anchored down to a slab and they had good cross bracing in them with partition walls, what we call partition walls. But you can see the destruction there. That's all around it. And the buildings are heavily damaged, but they just didn't lose the roof like that. So they actually did quite well.
Yeah, that differential capacity of some structures to survive and others not is something we'll talk about in a minute too. Did you see the candle factory area?
Yes, I went down and looked and walked around the candle factory and studied the steel structure.
Was there any indication that there was a tornado shelter within the complex?
Well, the word shelter is used loosely.
Right.
It's like, what is a shelter? And I was talking with several people there, and I got, there were several areas in the plant where you could go to, restrooms, for example. There's some work benches that you could get under, but these are not what I would call safe room style. They said they had some sort of a safe room that was 12 by 12, but when you've got 100 and plus people, and then I asked for the construction of the safe room, and it was just cinder blocks, which collapsed, and 3 people that went in there died. So it's like, it really wasn't what I would call an NSSA, which is the National Storm Shelter Association, approved safe room. When we say safe room, it is a steel reinforced concrete with a concrete roof.
Right.
And that's what a true safe room is. So the term shelter is relative.
Yeah, this has come up in the reporting on the Amazon facility as well. I know you didn't get that area, but they began to, in a press conference on Monday, the Amazon officials were saying there's a safe area within the complex with no windows. It's pretty clear. I've sent queries to them about just what you were saying. Is there a specific, structure defined as a tornado shelter? And my guess is no. So we'll save the discussion of Amazon for a minute from now, but let's go to 2004. And You didn't investigate this particular tornado, but you know a lot about it. It was 2004 in Illinois. Powerful storm that became an F4 tornado, and you can see here the images that Scott Smith famously took, showing pretty close up where it's starting to devastate a factory. And I've been looking into this, writing about it. The company was pretty remarkable in the sense
Yes.
that they did some things ahead of time that one would think would be the norm now, because of the clear-cut outcome in this case was extraordinary. So there you can see in the distance, that is the tornado ripping apart completely the Parsons manufacturing plant. Here's another view from a report that was done afterwards, showing, explaining what happened. The plant was completely destroyed. Here's from the company website. But it had these shelters, and these were pretty strong. They were steel reinforced concrete areas, and it's remarkable to me, reading the reports, that not only was no one killed, but no one was injured out of 150 people at the plant that day. So tell me what you know about what was different there. You pointed to those buildings a minute ago that stood the test there in Mayfield, and what makes the difference?
Well, it's a great example, and it shows that you can save everybody. And that's really a great story. And I wish that could be done across the board. But as you well realize, that costs money, and it's a lot of money. To have safe rooms put in a building like that, that takes a lot of bucks. So you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. And that has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So, it's like, do you want a Christmas bonus this winter, or do you want a storm shelter? And the odds of a tornado hitting a manufacturing plant like this is very remote. But this example shows it happens.
Right.
And the tornado alley, as you know, shifts around in seasons. And Kentucky and Tennessee have seen tremendous violent tornadoes, all kinds of months. It doesn't matter which month it is. So you can get violent tornadoes any time of month. It doesn't have to happen in the spring.
The other thing that was really interesting, oops, my camera keeps popping out on me, but I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Speaking of reliability and predictability, the other thing that was clear in this case, when you read the detailed reports, it's not just the structure. There's 4 components to this. There's having a defended structure. There's having situational awareness. Having, in this case, they actually trained employees so that when there was a radio warning, one of them would go out and be a spotter to see, as you were saying, remember, the odds are really low. It's still going to hit your spot of turf, right? But so then when the spotter says it's coming, then everyone goes. And they did drills at least twice a year, and they had it evaluated. So maybe remind folks that this isn't just about a room.
Well, I think all of that is extremely important, because any one of those things that breaks down and doesn't happen, then you have a catastrophe on your hands. So it is a series of links, like in the links of a chain, and you got to have every link just as strong as possible. So I think this is kind of a model for other facilities to take a look at and say, hey, these tornadoes, although they're rare, there are no safe places in these big box places. These metal buildings or tilt up big box buildings don't have really any safe areas. They may have a designated safe area, but a bathroom or a closet, something like that, it won't provide the ultimate protection.
Right. So here's the big question that you deal with as an engineer, or with a policy passion I deal with as a journalist. Why in the world is what we're looking at here a building that was destroyed, sadly, but everyone kept safe. Not the norm, especially for new construction. But then, of course, as I learned, we don't have a national standard for earthquake code, of course, because that's different. America is very variegated, right, in how we deal with these things. So what would be, well, first of all, is this, I assume this is still not the norm, even though this story is so compelling, right?
Oh, it's not the norm. Absolutely not the norm. Mr. Parsons is to be commended for what he has done here. And he saved 150 lives. So that is, he's a hero in my book, what he did. So it's amazing that you have to take that initiative, because you're right. The building codes don't mandate that you must put in a safe room in every warehouse. Mm-hmm. No, the building codes are a minimum design, and the minimum design is these manufacturing plants are built no better than your house. I mean, they're built to the same building code. So that's, these, and they're giant spans. So they take a lot of wind load, and they obviously don't do very well. They're not meant to be shelters in the first place.
Right.
And you get this F4 tornado, wind speeds of 180 miles an hour when they're only built for 90. Well, that's 4 times the forces on a building that are supposed to be designed for. So they're not designed for that. So, I was asked the question yesterday, did I see anything new? And really, I did not, because the buildings performed as we would expect them to, with a wind speed that goes 4 times over design. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Complete collapse.
Yeah.
These manufacturing plants, and without getting a little too technical, they're in bays. I mean, they have a steel frame, and it's connected to another steel frame by purlins and girths. Mm-hmm. So they reinforce each other. So when one gets overloaded, it transfers that load to the next bay, and that transfers the load to the next bay, and that transfers the load to the next bay. And guess what happens? A domino effect. Boom, 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 boom. Sure. They all fall down. So the whole building collapses.
Wow. So, I've written about this issue of expanding vulnerability, what Steve Strader and Walker Ashley called an expanding bullseye of vulnerable structure that's been booming in the Southeast and some of these other areas. They mostly historically have focused on housing, modular homes, mobile homes. Is there a similar bullseye being built through these kind of pop-up box? It's kind of big box industry. You've got the big box, Walmart, you've got the big box Depot, you got the big box. They're all these kind of structures. Are you going to be a busy guy the next couple of decades because of all that vulnerability?
Well, understand, I'm getting pretty old. This kind of survey work it really pulls on me. So it's going to be left up to the future surveyors out there. I've published a lot of papers. I give a lot of lectures, and I see a lot of students out there that are going to be phenomenal damage surveyors in the future. So they'll have to take the baton and run with it, and look at this. But here's the thing: the targets are getting bigger. More people are getting in harm's way here, and they need to eat. They need to have clothing. And so you're going to have the demand with feeding a lot of people, clothing a lot of people. And that's why the move is to big box, is because that's where they can make lots of food and lots of clothes in these facilities. But they also put the employees at risk if they don't have adequate shelter.
So I've been poking at OSHA and NOAA, I guess together they're working on trying to fill some of these gaps for employee safety. Although, again, it seems like it's hard to do in this nation unless I'm missing something or maybe we're always playing catch up to some extent, it seems like. Well, here's the question. Here's the question, though. Does it always take a direct hit for some chunk of United States real estate region to say, oh, we need to do this too?
We live in an action reaction society. I mean, the preparedness is out there. It's up to people like Mr. Parsons to go beyond what is mandated and do it himself because he had an experience with tornadoes when he was younger.
Right.
So, and that's usually what it takes is, but he went way above and beyond what normally is a course of action and it's to be commended. But to try to mandate that, you're going to get a lot of pushback because it costs money to do this.
Right.
And they don't have these safe rooms over in the Southeast or in Mexico. It's like, and they can make
good point. Yeah.
they can make those far cheaper there than they can here. So it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to take jobs away from people for a safe room? Yeah, it's a dilemma, and there's no easy answer here.
I guess it comes down to the value of human life as opposed to in these economic analyses. I think.
Well, it comes down to the value of money.
Well, no, yeah, but it's like when I talked to Dan, what's his name, Kevin Simmons,
Yeah,
and Dan Sutter. They're economists, and they run these models of costs and benefits, and in the United States, sometimes the valuation of that loss of the life of somebody is not where some people would set it. But as you say, there's no easy answer.
yeah, there's no easy answer.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you're still on the case. Are you teaching the next generation? Are you? How do people
yes.
learn best not only how to assess a building, but how to convey the importance of these things we're talking about?
Yeah. The National Weather Service goes out and assesses damage, and they've asked me every year to go up to their training center and present a 3.5-hour lecture on what to look for when you go out there and how to preach preparedness. And so I've done that for a long time, and the crop of personnel out there are just phenomenal, very knowledgeable, and it's just we're in a kind of a difficult time with the pandemic and that to try to get people out there and do the survey, and then we're overwhelmed with a 250-mile long track that is almost a mile wide in places, and there's way too many buildings to look at. I mean, you can't possibly look at every building. It would take weeks and weeks, and people are already cleaning up and wanting to get on with their lives here. So it's a daunting task to document, but I've always pushed for building better because I've seen the destruction with countless number of surveys I've done. I think we can build better. The state of Florida has a building code that is, the best building code in the nation in terms of wind resistance. And why can't we do that for the rest of the U.S.? And then, because of cost. I know it's cost, but we are still building buildings the way my grandpa was building buildings back. So it's like, why have we not been able to learn by this and anchor it down? Just anchor these buildings down properly, and you can resist it. And you say, well, these tornadoes are so violent, there's no way you can withstand building that. And that's true. So let's then turn our attention to protecting the occupants like Mr. Parsons did.
Right. And maybe if there's a formula for cost effectiveness that gets it, well, what's a way to build a reinforced restroom area that is maybe not as costly as what he did based on his experience with the 1974 super outbreak, but that's way better than normal. Is someone looking at a way to modularize this, or sort of? I would think Amazon, like a company like Amazon, if anybody could do this at scale, it would be them.
Oh, absolutely. And restrooms are one place, but also like a cafeteria, because you're going to have hundreds of people in these buildings, and it's like you can't fit them all in a restroom. So it's having something like a cafeteria. And there's the paper that you showed here by Miller. There's a picture in there of the actual safe room that is in the building now. and you can see it. It looks kind of modular to me.
Right,
So,
right.
I think that that certainly is possible. And it's just, if you can create a market for that and sell that, yeah, you'll find
Right
these
there.
things. There you go. Look at that figure 6. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, that can be easily done. Yes, it takes up some floor space, but you can put that at the end, and it has a concrete roof, and therefore very, very few windows.
Right.
That looks like an approved shelter. So if it's an approved shelter, there you go.
All right. Well, if Jeff Bezos can send rockets into space, maybe he and his company can do something like set the standard for this kind of part of a facility.
Good point, Andy.
I'll ask them.
I'm sure. I'm sure he'll hear about it from you.